Hello and welcome to the On the Slate movie podcast. I'm Wesley.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Asher.
And on the slate for today is a deep dive into the secret life of Walter Mitty. Hit the music. So this is our deep dive episode, and every month we're going to do a deep dive into one specific movie, and we're going to do a news episode. So if you haven't listened to our other one, you should listen to that one that we talked about a few weeks ago. But anyway, we're talking about the secret life of Walter Mitty. Asher, this is your favorite movie, right?
I would say one of my favorite movies. It definitely has made a huge impact on me, one as a filmmaker and just as a viewer. And when I first saw it, it was kind of one of those movies that flew under the radar for me. And I wasn't really expecting much out of it, but I knew about it. So I was like, well, it's on TV. Let me watch it. And yeah, it's definitely one of the movies I think about when people ask me, what's your favorite movie? Because it's hard to say one movie, but this is one that has continually popped up. So super stoked to definitely talk about this today.
Yeah, I am too. I'm really glad you showed this to us because it's a movie I hadn't seen before, and kind of similar to you, it was kind of something that I never thought twice about. But I'm really excited to dissect,
dissect and decipher
and poke and
the
prod.
quintessence. So we can start just by reading the plot. We'll just cover kind of the basis of that. We'll dive into it. And brief thing to mention, this is a spoiler-filled conversation. It's been out for a couple years, so if you haven't seen it, we encourage you to go watch it and then come back and tune into this episode. Without further ado, let's do this. So, the manager of the negative assets sector of Life magazine, Walter Mitty, has been working for 16 years for the magazine and has a tedious life, not going anywhere but to and from work. He is an escapist, daydreaming into a fantasy world where many times a day. Let me redo that. He is an escapist, daydreaming into a fantasy world many times a day. There we go. There we go. Walter has a crush on a recently hired employee named Cheryl Melhoff, but he is too shy to invite her out, and he is trying to contact her via online dating. The magazine is preparing to release its last printed edition, and the loathsome manager of transition, Ted Hendricks, is preparing an inevitable downsizing over the next few days. Walter has been the liaison between the magazine and the mysterious independent photographer Sean O'Connell, who has sent to him a package of negatives and a wallet as a gift for his work. Sean also suggests to the senior manager the use of negative 25 for the cover of the last edition. However, Walter cannot find the missing negative. Walter has no means to contact Sean and finds a clue that he might be in Greenland. He decides to travel to Greenland to track Sean down in the beginning of an unbelievable adventure.
All right. And we totally wrote that ourselves.
We totally wrote that ourselves.
It was not taken from IMDb user Claudio Carvalho.
And you cannot read that for yourselves in the show notes.
There you go. Wow, beautifully done, Asher. So, Ben Stiller directed this movie, who I think is a very prolific, visual director, surprisingly. You know, you don't really think of Ben Stiller as a director in general, typically. Usually you just think of a goofy character actor or comedian. And then he also plays the lead role, so he directs himself. Walter Mitty. Kristen Wiig plays Cheryl Melhoff, his love interest. Some other interesting characters, too. I think Adam Scott plays Ted, that transition manager. Perfect casting there. Patton Oswalt plays the eHarmony guy.
Todd
is hilarious.
So perfect.
And then Sean Penn makes a brief appearance as Sean O'Connell, the mysterious photographer. So Am I missing anybody? I think
I think those are the main
characters.
Kind of the
people.
whole cast right there.
Yeah. There's a few other interesting characters, like his work buddy. I forget his name, but anyway. Yeah, so this movie was released in 2013. So it's been 11 years now. And it's an adaptation of a short story that was written over 100 years ago. And there was also a movie called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty that came out in the 40s, I believe, or the 30s.
Yeah.
So this is not an adaptation of the movie, though. It's more the short story. And yeah. In the critics' eyes, it wasn't that highly received, but I think this is kind of a fan favorite, you know?
Yeah.
So 7.3 on IMDb. Metacritic has it at a 54. Rotten Tomatoes, 53. Is that 53 audience or 71 audience? I don't remember. It's just decent all around, but in terms of how it was received, didn't really get that much awards consideration really. But yeah, I figured we could just jump in and talk about, like, what do you think are some of the strongest parts of the movie that you would praise this movie for. I think it's good to start off with positive things, and then maybe later, if we have any criticisms, we can get into that. But
yeah. Well, I guess I'll start.
Great.
And I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts, because this is, I think, probably the fourth time I had seen this movie by sitting down and watching it all the way through. So it'll be cool to hear what y'all's thoughts were as it being your first time. But man, I mean, I think the character himself, Walter Mitty, I think there's a lot of things that people can find themselves in, like within that character, like similarities that they can relate to, whether it's, falling into the mundaneness of life or doing something that you're just kind of going through the motions. And maybe we see in the movie, like, as we learn more about Walter, we learn more that he's not this little piece of gray square that one of the characters described him as. Like, they thought just by talking to him, he was just a little piece of paper and it was a gray square, like very boring, nothing interesting. But we see, as we learn more about Walter, like, there's so much more to him that was a part of him when he was younger, but through situations in life, like losing his dad and just having to kind of come to terms with a more realistic lifestyle in a sense. Because after, losing his dad, that really changed a lot of his outlook on life. Like, he just started getting a job and, started to do things that could just help out, with the family and stuff. And it's cool just seeing how these events that put Walter in the situation where he has to figure something out for work, he has to get to the bottom of something, and that leads him to interact with not only people, but also just environments and scenarios that I think start to show the real Walter again. Like, through all these scenarios and people interactions, he's able to kind of find himself again, and even find himself in a greater way than what was there before. So that was something that I thought was really cool. Like, I loved just the character development of him from start to finish, and something that I could definitely relate to. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on his character, or, anything like that.
Yeah. I honestly agree with a lot of what you said. I don't know if I touched on this in the Interstellar episode, but I really love films that kind of touch or deal with the what I just described as the human experience, which is a very vague and general term that you could probably apply to, like, literally any media. But something that's, like, specifically, like, almost critiquing it, which I think this movie does extremely well. Like you said, I think everyone, at least in, at least in America and kind of in the Western world, can relate to this idea of like monotony and being in like this endless cycle of, you know, you get up, you go to work, you go home. And dreaming, as Walter does a lot, or daydreaming in this case, of escaping that or of something spectacular or something beyond. And translating that into like something that doesn't have to just be this kind of like dream or daydream or false reality, but into something that you can actually do. Now, some of the stuff he does in the movie is a little fantastical, even in the real bits.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I don't think you necessarily have to, let's say, go to near an active volcano, which he does in the film.
Yeah.
To get that sort of excitement out of life, right?
Yeah.
So that was like probably one of the best kind of like through lines or aspects, was just Walter's breaking free kind of the monotony cycle.
Yeah, and I think what I really liked about how they displayed like his journey as a character, I think at the beginning, like what he desires and what he longs for comes from like the secret life, right? These visions and or daydreaming aspects of his character, where he does all these crazy things. I think the funniest one was when it was like the statue that he said, like, "Look what I made for you, Cheryl." And it's like this like ridiculous statue of them like embracing each other or something.
He's like holding her up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a gold statue.
Yeah, that was hilarious. But I like how as the movie goes on and he starts doing more and more adventurous things, those daydreaming episodes like stop because he's actually like living them out. So he doesn't like need to daydream. And I thought that was a nice detail that they put in the movie. So yeah, as far as like his character goes, I think ditto to pretty much what you guys have said. And
yeah,
I think the use of flashbacks, or not flashbacks, but the use of daydreams, I think were really intentional and effective in developing his character. So also I think the crucial point for his character turn was when he was in, was it Greenland or was he in Iceland? It was when he was in the bar.
I think that was the bar in Greenland. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like, doesn't really want to get on this plane, but then
Helicopter.
In his daydream, I think it's like his final daydream in the movie, actually, maybe.
There's one more when he's biking.
That's true. That's true.
The birds kind of form Cheryl Mehoff.
Oh, okay.
I think that's the
Her
final
face.
one.
Yeah. So maybe it's not the final. It's one of the final ones where she's like playing Major Tom by David Bowie, and that's like the thing that helps him get over that hump of like, okay, I'm finally actually going to commit to like doing these things that will change my life. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a fun scene. It was really goofy, but
Yeah.
I thought it like worked for the movie, you
Yeah.
know, and so
I like how he told her at the end of the movie, like when they both were let go from Life magazine, he told her when they met up afterwards, he's like, "Hey, I just want to let you know that you got me through some of the things that I had to face. Like, I had to get on this helicopter that was going to be piloted by a drunk pilot, and we were heading into a storm, and I had to get on a ship in the middle of the ocean in a storm." And I was like, no, I don't want to go, like, I don't want to do that. But, imagining Cheryl singing that song to him and him telling her that she, helped him get through that and make that step, I thought was a really sweet moment. And I think that said a lot for who Walter was. Like, if you look at the beginning of the movie, he was just struggling with the fact of sending an electronic wink to her on eHarmony.
yeah.
Like, not even face to face. He couldn't even like bring himself to send a wink. And even when he did send a wink, it was after like, a moment of contemplation, you know. But then
at didn't even work.
Yeah, I know, and it didn't even work
because the computer was glitching.
Yeah, the glitch. It was so funny. Yeah. But then like look at that, and then look at the end of the movie when he can like literally look her in the face and tell her what she meant to him and how she was able to help him even when she wasn't around. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, another part of the movie that's, and it's not really like you guys have touched on, I don't know if it's, I wouldn't define it as a comedy, but it is like really funny.
It is.
So it's not like back to back to back jokes, but they're sprinkled in there, you know, enough to where you're like constantly like having a pretty good laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favorite might be the when he's finally getting back to America, the second time. So he leaves the country twice. Yeah. The second time he's landing in California, and the TSA agents, they don't say anything, right? You're just looking at it through the X-ray that the TSA agents have when they scan people, and it just shows him he seemingly picks a fight with them. And it shows him getting kind of like body slammed
by the big funny TSA lady.
Yeah.
Like he backs up into her.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the next scene is just him in lockup getting interrogated by, I guess like border security or something. I don't know. Maybe it's just TSA again. Yeah. But I found that really like, it comes out of nowhere. You're not expecting it because the scene before that, he's like playing soccer in a mountain.
Yeah, it was like a very sentimental scene.
Yeah, and then it cuts to him getting jumped by TSA agents.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I think that's like the Zoolander and the Tropic Thunder aspect of Ben Stiller coming out, you know? Yeah. Like there's really jarring and goofy humor.
Like over the top almost. Not quite Zoolander or Tropic Thunder, but like it's right there.
Yeah.
When it comes to the kind of humor that it's pushing towards.
Yeah. There was a lot of that random humor.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it was definitely in the daydreams at first. Mm-hmm. Like, especially when, like, the first daydream he has, he's jumping into a building on fire. And then he comes down at the bottom, saving a 3-legged dog. And he gives it, the dog was also Cheryl's. And so, like, he gives the dog to Cheryl. And he's like, I hope it's okay. But as I was running down the stairs while the building was on fire, I manufactured this prosthetic leg for your dog. And he was, like, showing how it was working and stuff. Oh, my gosh.
I think probably my favorite daydream is also hilarious is this superhero fight he has with, is it Ted?
Oh, yeah.
It's you know, it's 2013, and I don't think this movie has the biggest budget, especially not for like CGI. So it looks kind of goofy, and maybe that's intentional, but it's honestly kind of well choreographed for what it is, which is just Walter daydreaming up, beating up his new terrible boss. But they go kind of through the city, and they're like they're not destroying buildings, but they're doing major damage to them and beating up cars and all this other stuff. And you're almost kind of like you're watching Man of Steel, which actually came out the same year in 2013.
Really?
But
another time, Jason.
But I think that was a really fun like moment in the movie that they don't necessarily have to do, I guess. But
yeah,
it kind of goes to further that escapism theme that they were playing on. And I think all this to say is like all this like kind of absurd humor, especially within these daydreams, kind of goes to further how much Walter is wanting to get out of his actual life. Mm-hmm. But it's also like super funny.
Yeah, super funny. Yeah, it was funny how like when the thing that I thought they did really well was transitioning from real life to daydreams. Mm-hmm. Because I would say when Walter first was in the elevator with Ted and he said, you know who looks good with a beard? Dumbledore, not you. And then at first I think there were moments where I was like, oh, did he actually just say that? But then it was a daydream. And then like it escalates when he's in the elevator with Ted again. And then it's like, I'm trying to do my job. And then they just like bust through the elevator, flying out the door or flying out the building, you know? Yeah. and their jumps were super. I feel like they were on purpose trying to like take inspiration from like Japanese choreography with like their jumps. They were super exaggerated. I don't know. Like using wire work and stuff. They're like, let's lean into this. Let's make it more funny.
Yeah, those were, I think, overall, I think it was a really funny movie for sure. And and I think just the other characters in the movie, I don't think are quite as dynamic, which is understandable because they're not like the main character. It's really Walter's movie, but I think they do serve important story purposes. I mean, particularly Cheryl. And I think Patton Oswalt's character, was it Todd? I think is his
Todd
name?
from eHarmony.
Todd from eHarmony.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Like, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about it because I think he's really funny. In terms of the story, and just like how he fits in. Like, I don't know. I just think it's interesting how he's like got this voice in his ear, essentially calling him at the most ridiculous time. Like he's on top of a mountain, and I don't know. I guess it just kind of serves like that. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think the purpose of like Todd's character is?
Movie? I thought, watching the movie, I kind of thought Todd was like a recurring daydream.
Oh yeah,
because he would always, like you said, he kind of just he's always calling while Walter's in the middle of doing something kind of crazy, like getting ready to get hit by an exploding mountain or a volcano, or getting ready to finally confront Sean O'Connell on this mountain. So it just kind of always seemed like, I don't know if this guy's like a real person. Because he's also like telling Todd all these ridiculous things, and Todd's like, wow, that's really cool. That's really going to help your eHarmony page. And I'm just like, a real person wouldn't believe this, right? Like over the phone. Because for reference, Todd is only heard on a phone.
Yeah.
Until near the end of the movie where you see him, which confirms that he's actually a real person, by the way. And not some figment of Walter's imagination.
Yeah.
This movie's not like the Joker where you're not sure what's real or not. It's like it's pretty clear. Like they establish the rules of like what's real and what's not pretty effectively.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, Todd's actually a real dude. And I do see what you're saying though. Like what's the like purpose in the story? Because he's kind of just like a cheerleader for Walter.
Yeah.
And he's almost really set up as a device to get Walter out of trouble with the TSA. Because earlier, Todd mentions that he's just he works out of California. And then later in the movie, Walter's landing in California after coming back and then gets in a fight with the TCA. And it's like, is there anybody in California who can verify your identity? He's like, oh, I know. Todd, of course. So, is that cheap? Yeah, maybe a little. I think Todd's funny enough, though, to kind of like, I let it slide.
I thought it was a good world building moment, to be honest. I thought it was like, it was cool how these people had all of these connections, because I felt like it reminded me of certain people I've met, and how you meet someone and then you might find out that you both grew up in the same place but never knew that. And I was like, you know what? I have kind of experienced these moments where, it kind of goes to that phrase, oh, small world, like, of course, you're right here, or I'm in this spot right when I need Todd, as in the movie. That was my take on it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then like another thing about another aspect of the movie where it kind of like makes me second guess what the movie, like, is the movie trying to kind of trick me a little bit? Which wasn't the case with Todd. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it definitely wasn't. He was definitely real. Was the investigation trying to find Sean? Because as you go through the movie, it looks like Sean actually set up these very deliberate and elaborate clues left behind for Walter to find, right? And then it's revealed that that wasn't the case at all.
Not at all.
The missing picture was in the wallet that Sean gifted Walter at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is another like really funny moment. Because Walter throws away the wallet because he's like frustrated because he couldn't find Sean, and then later he finds another clue and finally gets in contact with Sean, and he's like, where's the picture? He's like, oh, it's in your wallet. What'd you do with it? Oh, I threw it away.
It's like, well, that kind of hurts my feelings.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just like this big, it's like the whole movie is kind of like also a joke.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you go through all this and it's like the scavenger hunt. And then you finally get in contact and you find this mysterious Sean. And he's like, oh, yeah, I mean, the reason I contacted your mom and did this, that, and the third is because I wanted to know where you worked. Or not where you work, know your routine so I could leave you your gift. You weren't meant to find me.
It's like, what are you doing here? Yeah. Yeah, that I really enjoyed that scene when he finally walked upon Sean. Like he was hiking to find Sean, but then as he was on the phone with Todd, he stumbled across Sean, and Sean's like, hey, like, do you mind? Like, I'm working here. Can you stop talking on the phone? And he's like, oh my gosh, it's Sean. And yeah, it was so cool how like, I feel like the whole movie sort of built up Sean to be this larger than life hero. And yet the moment that Walter finally meets Sean, it's a very just down to earth experience. Like, it's just another dude who thought it'd be fun to, you know, slip the very important negative in his wallet and then just leave it at that. And he's like, yeah, I thought it would be kind of cute, but I see it was kind of a silly idea now. And Walter's like, yeah, like, why would you do that?
Yeah. Man, these are all
Yeah.
These are all great thoughts.
But the scene, I think, ends very well. Like, they kind of had that skiff, but I think the scene ends very well because they go from that, and then in that conversation, the snow leopard shows up, and that's what Sean was up there for, to take a picture of a snow leopard. And that was like a very, you know, sweet moment for Sean and his career and his experience as a photographer, but for Walter to be able to be there and experience that too. And to experience Sean not taking the photo because he just wanted to be present in the moment and not have the distraction of a camera. I thought that was a really cool way to close the scene and to kind of like bring like a very kind of like bro intimacy to their relationship, because they had been working together for years but had never actually met, you know. So I thought that was a really cool way to cap that scene, I guess.
I think it was also like a really good almost summary within the movie of the movie where like Sean goes through all this adventure and stuff on his own that we don't get to see, right? But we're assuming he goes on an adventure almost similar to Walter because he's following the same path to get to him. To just catch a glimpse of the snow leopard. And when Walter, you know, asks him, like, well, why didn't you take the photo? And he's like, sometimes I just like to sit and watch.
Yeah.
And like that, you know, kind of emphasizing that it was more about the experience, right? And everybody's like, you know, the very cheesy, it's not the destination, it's the adventure, or whatever. But if any movie kind of like does that well, it's this one, where the picture isn't necessarily what was important, quite literally, but getting there to experience it was. I think that's a really fun moment because it has everything. Like, it has the humor of him, like, well, why'd you do that with the 25th negative? Why'd you put it in my wallet? And then kind of getting quiet and it's like, well, you know, because of that, Walter got to do all these awesome things. So, yes, not having the negative and losing his job kind of sucked. However, what did he gain? You know, he gained quite a bit.
Yeah. And he ended up standing up to his, you know, jerk of a boss at the end. And then that actually led to, like, the last issue of their magazine being, you know, really nice and, like, in honor of, you know, those who came and like had built that paper magazine for so many years. And he was like, Walter was like on the front cover, right? So,
which that was the 25th negative, by the way.
Yeah.
So it was definitely like a full circle moment there where you realize like that theme of like your purpose in life isn't necessarily like the work you do, but it like goes beyond that. You know, it's like who you are as a person. I think it's kind of what I was drawing from there. It's like, yes, there's that idea of like, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, but it's not necessarily about like taking the photos. It's about, you know, your purpose is more like, what is taking the photo like get you in life beyond just what you're doing. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's a few themes that I really got out of the movie. I think this idea of like escapism, I think a lot of us can do, right? Especially in the modern age where we're just doom scrolling all the time, you know, and this could lead to like lives like Walter Mitty had, right? You know, just not getting out and doing anything, being content with staying inside. And I think that's a real thing in our society, right? Like escaping into like these fantasies because like, I don't know, we're depressed, we're lonely, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that was pretty impactful, you know, and also like the journey of self-discovery, right? Because I think if you are just staying inside, or if you're not doing anything really with your life other than going to work and coming home, you're just like a husk of, you know, a person. You're not really like expressing yourself that way. You know, you're just kind of like going through the motions. Because I notice in life when I'm getting into those rhythms of just going to work, going home, doing nothing, I feel like I'm just not being myself, you know? And I think be yourself is a pretty universal theme that you see in a lot of media, but you know, I think movies are constantly trying to like express that theme because it's just timeless, you know. It's like and how our culture can rob us of ourselves, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think that is impactful, and I understand why it is a really impactful movie for a lot of people. Just like in researching and like watching video essays on this movie and just talking with you guys, just seeing how like different people have watched this movie and like have been inspired. Like I even think after we watched it, Asher, you and your wife said like, yeah, we were just feeling really adventurous, so we went out and did stuff. Like I'm glad that this movie like inspires people to do that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, do I think it's like a perfect movie top to bottom? No, but like I think what it can do for people, you know, and the message it tells is, you know, maybe a little cliche, but I think it's timeless and executed well. So yeah.
The self-discovery part of it really hit home for me when I watched it for the first time, because when I watched it for the first time, I personally was actually going through like a lot of positive self-discovery. Like I was learning more about who I was as a child of God, and like my relationship with God really did change a lot in that season of time. And watching this movie felt like an extension of that. And that just hit the nail on the head for me. Yeah. There's a lot of things I was able to relate to. And I think that has still influenced certain decisions and, you know, certain ways of wanting to live life now. And yeah. And I think for other people too, I think that self-discovery has definitely like been something that has resonated well. Yeah.
It's just like discovering that freedom in the life that you're like supposed to live, you know. I think that's one thing this movie can point you to, which I think is pretty profound. Yeah. So anyway,
any thoughts on self-discovery, Jason?
I mean, other than that, I like agree with what you guys are saying. You know, I think it's one of those kind of classic tales. Is like kind of art imitating life and life imitating art. Where there's just like this idea of like where we kind of want to know that other people are experiencing the same things we do. And through that, we kind of make, you know, media, and express that. And it's like, this is how I felt. I don't know if Ben Stiller ever. I have to imagine he felt the same way that Walter does when he was directing this movie at some point to want to make such a movie, right? But then to communicate that with other people, right? It's like, hey, this is like kind of how I felt. And then other people are like, yeah, I felt the same way. And I think that's really like important, I guess. I guess that's why we watch movies, right?
Yeah.
Or play video games or read books. Is just I guess there's some sort of comfort in knowing that my experience is not entirely like my own. Not to say that, not to downplay, someone's experiences, but I do think, at least for me, like it's very impactful and reassuring to know, like, I'm not the only one who felt this way about something. And then to put it into a form that's almost like really fun. It kind of makes light of the topic without demeaning it, right? It's a playful, he's really bored and life kind of sucks. But it's not like super down on it. It's just like, it's just kind of like that. But it's also uplifting, I guess.
That's a good word.
Yeah. So, like another thing I think all of us noticed when we watched this movie was just the filmmaking elements, like the cinematography in particular, I think was surprising for a movie like this. I think the film critic-y word would be like, it's sophisticated. I think it is a sophisticated like comedy. You don't really see a lot of, really artistic in terms of like visual filmmaking comedies. So it was refreshing to see that. I think just a lot of like wider angle shots where you can see the sets that they're working within like more fully and completely. And, obviously they're out in like Greenland and Iceland shooting. And so, I mean, you have the beauty of nature that you can capture. And, even like the was it New York where he lives, like the New York scenes, I still think they make the most out of what they can do, which, I'm not like a huge expert in cinematography, but as somebody that's been watching a lot of movies over the last several years, just like I've come to know like what works and what doesn't, and like what's fine and like what actually is more impressive and better for the storytelling. And I just think like watching, there's like these tracking shots. There's one in particular I wanted to highlight. It's when Walter Mitty finally decides to get on the plane. Yeah. And like he's leaving the Life office and you could see like he's running and like the camera's following him, and like in the background you can see all of these different Life magazine issues that are what do you call it? Like put on the wall for display. Yeah. And like all of them are like seeming like encouraging him to go based on the headlines. And you can just see how it tracks the shot. And I think it's also lit really well, that's just like one shot in particular that stuck out to me. But yeah, even like when he's like establishing shots, like even the opening credits where you can see it, like, I don't know. It's just, I think when you take the camera back and you can see more, I think that even when it's like the depressing part of his life or like the more lively part of his life, I think they did a good job of using these wide shots for the advantage of like seeing everything that's going on in the scene, showing you the world. I think we've all seen New York about 1 billion times in movies at this point. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, just making something fresh that also aids in the storytelling, serves the story. I think the cinematography, and I think Ben Stiller had that like vision as a director, which again, like for a comedy guy, you just wouldn't expect that. So it was refreshing.
Yeah, it's cool. I watched a while ago the behind the scenes B-roll of them making this film. And it was really cool seeing Ben Stiller, like just work with the team and like find these angles wherever they were, whether they were in the Life magazine office or out in Greenland or Iceland. Like it was cool just seeing that candid footage of them figuring out these angles and like being intentional about where they wanted to put the camera. And I thought it just puts icing on the cake because you see the actual intention and the effort behind the end result.
Yeah. And they could have just done the simple, like, camera A is pointing at Cheryl, camera B is pointing at Walter, edit back and forth between. You could get by with movie in doing that, but just think how much more it's like, oh, we'll just put both of them in the frame, have them both talking it out. Maybe it's a little bit longer of a take. Maybe it needs a little bit more time to get it right. But I think it's worth it, to do stuff like that. And just thinking of like my favorite movies with great cinematography, there's similar things, just pushing the envelope of the genre and like what they can do with camera work. So cinematography definitely impressive.
And I think and maybe I'm not going to say like whatever they did was easy to do, but I think it was a very simple execution of excellent camera work where, like you said, they just kind of pull outward and just let you like take in the scene that they're doing. And I think for me, it was really enjoyable because like when I think of like quote unquote like excellent camera work, I'm thinking of something like tracking something really well or kind of able to do fast movements or something to that line. Like for reference, John Wick Chapter 4, there's this top-down scene where they're kind of referencing Miami Vice, a video game.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And it's like this hotel room, and you see John Wick, like a top-down view, and he's over there, fighting the guys. And I'm like, that's like, I was like, man, that's
it was like 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's a really long.
It's like a 5-minute long take.
It's a really long scene, and that's like the antithesis of what Walter Mitty was. It wasn't fast or anything, but it was still like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Kind of deal.
Yeah.
But it wasn't high pace, high adrenaline, but you get all the details in. It was calm and it was really slow, and you're just like, let's enjoy Iceland while we're here, or Greenland while we're here, or Afghanistan, which we haven't really mentioned, but that's the mountains of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And like, I think there is a place for, shorter takes, even it's a swear word for me, but shaky cam. Like we saw it in like Band of Brothers, I think originally with that one scene where they're storming.
I think Jason Bourne might be.
Maybe Jason Bourne too.
I feel like Jason Bourne was a big pioneer for it.
Yeah, and like, and not just shaky cam, but also like, shorter takes or close-ups. I think there's a place for everything.
Yeah.
I think you just have to be intentional with what you're doing. And just sometimes like the medium shot of just like one character in a frame, then edit away when they're talking. I don't know. It's like we've seen that so many times, and just seeing like a refreshing wide shot every now and then, seeing something like take in the characters' performances. Like, I think if you let the actors like breathe and act, you can actually get a lot great moments out of them. And I think Walter Mitty does that well, and like there are moments where I think you can have fast editing. Like, I mean, and editing and camera work, I think are closely related, and like I'm not trying to compare Walter Mitty to like every single movie that I love with great editing and great cinematography, but like, just for an example of that concept, like Oppenheimer last year had extremely fast-paced editing. The takes weren't very long, or at least, I mean, maybe they were, but they were edited from shot to shot and really quickly, and that movie was 3 hours, but it felt like it was a breeze, So I think Walter Mitty, just having a higher sense of cinematography and editing, I think really helped it stand out from other movies in the genre. And it just reminded me of other movies that employ effective editing and cinematography.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and one thing that's cool is, if you guys remember in the bar scene when the pilot first approached Walter, they got into a little bar fight. And that was actually a moment where they did do, if I'm correct, a little bit of handheld camera movement that felt more shaky. But I think they did it in a tasteful way because they understood the tone of the moment. Like, it wasn't a calm moment. Like, those guys were punching each other, you know, and so I think they were able to know when to express that through the camera.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it wasn't shaky cam to the point where you couldn't understand what was going on visually. Like, you could still clearly identify what was going on.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big takeaway. You know, you can use a technique, but when you have that intentionality behind it and knowing when to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Intentionality for sure. And also, like, I didn't notice this myself. I actually saw somebody on YouTube talk about this, but one of the opening shots, maybe the opening shot when he's looking at eHarmony, one of the opening shots, he like steps away from his chair and then goes to like another chair or something. But the camera is still while he does it. So you can see him get up and walk. It's all one take. And then you can see, like, as he moves, the camera actually doesn't like immediately focus right. And I don't think that's like a mistake. I think that's just like, that's intentional for the themes of the movie. Like, or at least his character moment at that time. Like, oh, the focus is kind of like not in the right place. It's a little slow. I don't know. Maybe it was a mistake, but I don't think so. Like, I think that's an intentional thing that the cinematographer probably would have noticed that in like the opening shot of the movie, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that was something that was a mistake. I think it definitely served his character well. He's an unfocused character. He's kind of down in the dumps. Nothing seems clear to him. It's just all day by day, you know, misery.
And in that moment, that the focus was not only for the scene, but for Walter. Like, the focus was the computer, because he was like contemplating, should I send a wink to Cheryl?
Yeah.
And so, like, when he stepped away, I think they were intentional about that focus staying on the computer and not going over to Walter. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I saw it when we watched it and I was just like, they kept focus for a reason. Chef's kiss right there.
Yeah. So anyway, now I don't think the movie is 100% perfect. Like, I watched it. I'm like, if I would watch movies regularly back in 2013, like I do now, I don't know if I would have put it like near the top of my list of like favorite movies that year, but I still think it's like, there's a lot to get out of it. And I would definitely recommend people watching it. I think some like surface level criticisms you probably could make is just like product placement is all over the place in this movie. It's like I just looked this up while we were talking like a couple minutes ago, and apparently the eHarmony claims that they didn't actually advertise, but I don't know. I'm suspicious that Todd's whole character exists just to sell eHarmony. Like, I'm not totally sure. And then later on, that same character literally talks for like a whole minute about how great Cinnabon is. And like, I'm just like, okay.
Cinnabon.
And then they mentioned like so many different companies. I don't know, but I mean, it's not like it's a movie ruiner. It's just, I guess, worth talking about.
It's an interesting takeaway.
It's not on the level of in like Transformers 4 where they crash into a Bud Light.
There's a Mountain Dew Transformer.
That's the first Transformer.
Oh, that's the first one.
But at least that's funny. It's
funny.
It's a Transformer, right? But no, in Transformers 4, Mark Wahlberg crashes into a Bud Light truck.
Oh yeah, with the spaceship.
Yeah, I think it's the fourth one. And there's like a million Bud Lights everywhere, and he grabs one and he cracks one open and he drinks it with Bud Light facing the camera. That's what I would consider like egregious.
Yeah.
I guess talking about Cinnabon is...
The Cinnabon one was probably the most egregious, but maybe the eHarmony one.
It doesn't come out of nowhere though. Like, crashing into a truck full of Bud Light is out of nowhere. Going to an airport where Cinnabons very much are all the time.
Yeah.
And are like a popular, like, you know, if you're at the airport, you're eating fast food or a Cinnabon, I think. It's like not an uncommon thing, you know? So it's kind of like already there. They're different versions of product placement.
Yeah.
So one's egregious, one isn't, I think.
Yeah, I thought the product placement for me was done in a way where it didn't bother me. Like I thought that it was done in a way where they wanted to say like, hey, this movie still takes place in our world. Like it's not another world we're trying to build. And so I just kind of saw it as, life that we have. We'll see products, we'll interact with things, and we see them on billboards. We'll see them on computers and stuff, and we'll interact with certain brands. So I thought the product placement was done more tastefully, as opposed to other movies.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, don't you rave about Cinnabon?
To be honest, I can't even tell you the last time I had a Cinnabon.
That's a shame.
I do like Cinnabon. If you're listening, Cinnabon, we will gladly talk about how great you are if you pay us money to do it. So,
Cinnabon becomes our sponsor.
Cinnabon is probably not listening, but Walter Mitty, we may criticize Walter Mitty for product placement, but we won't criticize ourselves if anybody wants to sponsor us. So,
well, I think on the topic of like criticisms, I have like one like entire scene that I like actually have like, I don't know if I have an issue with it, but I'm like, it doesn't really need to be there. It's when they're in Central Park and Walter Mitty like daydreams about himself being Benjamin Button, which is, someone who's born old. And then as they grow up, quote unquote, they get younger and smaller, and spending his life with Cheryl as a Benjamin Button character. And
I like that moment. I'm glad that was in the movie.
Baby. Not like baby, but
I honestly...
I mean, it's absurdly like... It's funny in an absurd sense, but I just... every other daydream kind of communicates like this feeling he's having. And there are multiple daydreams involving Cheryl.
Yeah.
However, this one... Okay, he wants to grow old with her, but where does the Benjamin Button... Like, when he's fighting his manager, Ted, they have superpowers because it would make sense to fight with superpowers. Mm-hmm. It's not out of this question, right? When he first encounters Cheryl in the halls of Time magazine near the beginning of the movie, he fantasizes being this skier dude that sleds right in through the wall. But that's because right next to her there was a poster about a guy skiing in a mountain. So there's like context for everything. And then there's the Benjamin Button scene, which I don't think is set up at all. And it's like out of nowhere. I'm not saying it's not funny, but I'm like, everything else kind of like had a place.
Yeah,
I think. And this felt a little out. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
It being out of nowhere made me love it more. Like,
I think I wish that they would have
leaned more.
I think it would have been even more funny of a movie if they would have done like more fantasy scenes. So I think like, yes, it makes sense for the character for them to like stop happening after a while, but I wish they would have like put more in there. And I honestly thought the Benjamin Button one was maybe the funniest one.
Well, but see,
I see what you're saying though.
Yeah, I guess that's what my conflict is like I said earlier, it's not really a comedy. It's just a movie that happens to be really, really funny.
Yeah,
but the movie's not about being funny.
It's got a more like sincere tone to it than like Zoolander, because like the Benjamin Button scene seems like something that's like, yeah, that's the Zoolander part of Ben Stiller, so I see what you're saying, but also I laugh so hard, like I'm not trying to.
I was there. I laughed too. I was cracking up at it, but I think at the same time, it's like in Zoolander, everything is cool because that's what the movie is. Like it is this absurdly goofy world, right? Yeah. But in this movie, well, yes, his daydreams, can be a little goofy. Mm-hmm. Not a single one of them is Benjamin Button levels of, weird.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. It's like I like it in a vacuum, but in the context of the film, it's not my favorite scene.
Well,
if we could do like a movie time capsule, I think I would include that scene just so that people.
I feel like people would miss the point. What is this movie about? 200
years from now, like they need to see Ben Stiller's old face on a tiny
Yeah.
baby body.
Yeah, I think the vein of criticism, as I would say, I think that I wanted to see more of like Cheryl's character. I think that she's kind of her and a lot of other characters, but I think it hurts her character more for being like sidelined for like the good like second act of the movie, right? And I think I would have liked to seen her like like more fleshed out as a character in general, because I think like they hinted at parts of her character, but I think she really like is there only for like Walter to like earn her approval, you know. But it's, I don't know. I feel like she could have been more dynamic in terms, of just like, oh, what makes her work? Like, is there going to be conflict between her and Walter? But I understand, like, they wanted to keep most of the character focus on Walter. And, like, she realistically probably couldn't really show up in Iceland, Greenland. And granted, I think they did try to, like, include her, like, in that one, like, fantasy scene with her singing. But I don't know. I feel like after the movie, I just didn't know all that much about her other than she was like nice and liked mystery novels, you know, but the whole movie was about like him just trying to like earn her love. Oh, that's not the whole movie. That was part of it. Like, I think it was part of his growth of like, oh, if I become myself, I can also be like attractive to like a partner, which, you know, I don't like disagree with that. Realistically, like I think that makes sense. Like if someone is confident in themselves, like they're probably more likely to find love than somebody that's not. But I don't know. Yeah, I just think that she's more of like a plot based character than like an actual character. I don't know if you guys felt that way, but
Do you think that with you, I guess, not knowing a whole lot about her by the end of the movie, do you think that reflects where Walter is at? Because it seems like by the end of the movie, they have had a few interactions. At least by the way the movie made it, it seems like all the interactions they've had were captured on camera. And so it seems like they're still very early in their relationship, I guess. I don't know. Do you think that could have been a reflection of that, maybe?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, possibly, you know. Yeah, I just, maybe that's not the writer's intention, is to like have super dynamic supporting characters in the movie. The focus was put on Walter, and that aspect was executed well. But yeah, I mean, just think of all the supporting characters. Like there's not a whole lot of depth to them, you know, which, I mean, I don't think most people that watch this movie are going to be like, oh, I don't like this movie because, you know, Todd isn't, you know, a vulnerable, he doesn't have his monologue of vulnerability. But I don't know. I guess I wanted to like see more of her in the movie. I guess I'm processing through this as we speak. So
Yeah.
I think most of the side characters serve a very, like, I think it's okay to have side characters that be there that just serve a specific purpose.
No.
And I think most of them fit within the role of the story, with the exception of Walter's sister. She does literally nothing the whole movie.
Yeah. Catherine Hahn, I think.
And I don't know if it's meant to be for like comedic reasons.
Yeah.
But all the jokes involving her kind of fall flat. But, you know, like Walter's mom, you know, she's supposed to tie in with kind of the stuff with Sean. Walter's coworkers, they're there to kind of show, one, you know, there's other people that are also losing their job at, you know, Life magazine. And, you know, his bosses, you know, there's Ted, who's the main guy, but there's a couple of other bosses. They're there to, you know, just kind of be this generally antagonistic force, I don't know, generally antagonistic presence within the movie.
No.
But then there's Walter's sister, who shows up to, I guess, let the audience know it's his birthday. I don't know if they could, that's kind of the only thing she does in the movie. And then comments about like the piano that they need to get into their mom's place.
She kind of provides a little bit of inconvenience as well for him. Because when they tried to move the piano in, it was like a whole issue, and he had to leave work because of it.
Yeah.
But I thought she was like a fun little window into his life. Like we got to see more of Walter outside of just him. And we got to see like, oh, he's a brother, and oh, he's a son, and he still has his mom.
Well, I guess like the thing with the piano stuff and the inconveniences, I think you could have given that to his mom. You know, the birthday thing too. Like I think all of that could have come from his mom, since she already kind of holds a, albeit minor, but kind of important role in the story.
Super important.
Yeah, it's really short, but it's like really important to him finding Sean. So, kind of like giving him a sister. Well, yes, I guess it informs us like, oh, you know, you learn about someone who's, or more about someone who, now that you know that they had a sibling growing up, and that his life experience was shared with someone else at the same time. But I don't think they do enough with that to justify the character's existence. You know what I mean? So if I had to pick a character in the movie, or pick like another thing that I think holds it back some beyond the Benjamin Button stuff, it would be like, I don't even remember her name. That's how, like, Rizzo?
No,
that's her. Like,
That's who
she's
she
like
was trying to
auditioning for Grease.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
See, like you didn't even remember that.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Like I don't even remember the character like name. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just.
I think what Asher brought up though is like when I was talking about Cheryl, and he was saying like how basically all their interactions together, and how you're talking about pretty much the only time that we see Cheryl is when she's interacting with Walter. I think I don't know. I had a thought of like maybe that was like the whole like perspective of the movie. Like I can't think of many scenes that like don't have Walter Mitty in them.
There aren't,
if
I
any.
don't think.
Like I think the whole movie is just kind of like seen through his point of view. So and that, so having that thought makes me think like, oh, that would make sense, right? Like he only sees certain parts of people's lives. You know, he doesn't see everything. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be a little bit lighter on my criticism of that. I think that's something that you have brought to my mind.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think that's a good
Interesting.
filmmaking technique, is like really narrowing the perspective of Walter Mitty. So
I'm trying to think if I could, like, as much as this movie, you know, hits home for me in a lot of ways, like I want to see it from, you know, the filmmaking perspective and the writing and all that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess I didn't think too much about the, like, what could be improved, because I think there was just a lot that was like I was just thinking so much about how it made an impact on me, that I didn't think much about, you know, any constructive criticism. But I'm trying to think now, like if I could say something that we could do to make the film maybe even better. Man,
You know, you don't have to. If a movie's already great, you don't have to try to add to it if that's what you think.
I get you.
I can offer something. I think I would have liked to have seen Ben Stiller let himself like act more. I feel like I would have liked to have seen more emotional moments from him.
We needed an Oscar-worthy cry.
Well, I would have honestly I wish they would have like given him like a big scene or something where he's like really just put the camera on him and let him act. You know, I feel like a lot of times it was just like, let's move the story forward, get to the next scene. I would have liked to have seen them slow down a little bit. And like, I think that would have elevated the movie. And I would have liked to have seen like Ben Stiller, like give the performance of his career here. You know, I think that could have happened. If they would have given him a little bit more space. And I say they, I mean, it's really him, right? He's the director.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen him giving himself more space to really be an actor, you know, like play to his strengths. I know he's a comedian, but I mean, we've seen comedians like I'm thinking of like Steve Carell, right? Like he's turned in some like really good performances. And I think Ben Stiller can do that. I've even seen like Will Ferrell do stuff like that, you know.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey, right? Like there's these comedians that when they're in the right situation, I think can really show what they can do. And I would have wished that we would have gotten like a bigger, like, I don't know, like a cheesy, like Shakespearean like moment. I don't know. I think that they could have fit something like that in there.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like entirely agree. Well, I do like, I think it would make sense technically that we would have a scene where he's like truly frustrated and angry with the situation and he has an outburst or breaks down like somewhere in the middle of the movie, like at the scene where he throws away his wallet, right? Like after he's kind of like given up. Have more of a moment, I guess. But I also think from the beginning of the movie, it's communicated pretty clearly like he's a pretty reserved guy who doesn't. Well, yes, he's discontent and he is frustrated to a point with how things are. I think he's also like kind of like you mentioned, a gray square where he wouldn't outburst like that.
Yeah, and it doesn't even need to be like an outburst. I just think his performance, I think, was, I don't know, pretty safe. I feel like the strength of his character was like in the writing and not necessarily, not that he did bad, but I feel like he could have done more with it.
Yeah, and you know, in the movie when his mom mentions how he kind of they touch on like when his dad died, he kind of shuts down and stuff like that. I think maybe you have a point to where they need to contrast that with him doing the opposite of shutting down more, as he's like, you know, quite literally like coming out of his shell, you know, physically like going to these places and stuff like that, but it's not 100% communicated through his personality, I guess. So I can see that. But I also think there's merit to maintaining his character. So while even though his perspective on life changes, he's still calm, collected, doesn't have too much to say Walter Mitty.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe like the scene where he stands up to his boss at the end. I think that could have been a moment.
Do you think that could have been a little...
I think that they could have done more.
There was
like,
more
with
there.
his performance. And I know that his boss was like a goofy character, but it just kind of seemed like it all revolved around like the quick little "don't be a jerk" jab. You know, I feel like it could have been bigger there. I don't know, not necessarily like yelling, but I don't know.
You think more could have been said?
I feel like
like a quip.
Yeah, and just having moments like that really like allow him to be the character more, you know, rather than just being the guy that's a medium for, you know, moving the plot along. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I kind of see what you're saying, especially about like I guess like his punchline at the end before he walked out. I'm thinking about it, and like in a way, I still thought that the Walter we saw at the beginning of the movie wouldn't have done that still. Like in a way, it still felt like he came out of his shell more, but it was still within this Walter character that they established. Like it felt on brand in a sense to his character, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And even like, you know, when they were playing soccer, when Walter was playing soccer with Sean and all of the other men up in the mountains, like I don't think Walter at the beginning of the movie would have played soccer like that.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I think there were some moments that led to Walter coming out of his shell, but at the same time, it was still done in a on character way, I guess. But I still see what you're saying, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the way I describe it is like he goes from being stiff to being loose.
I like that.
But he's made up of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point, I think it leans a little bit more into the realism. I know we talk about how unrealistic this movie kind of is. But, I mean, if you think about it, people who kind of go through massive changes, they're not real. I mean, I'm not going to debate philosophy because I'm not going to pretend to know. But like people who go through changes.
But you can, because that could be philosophy.
They're not going to be like completely different people. I know you hear that all the time. It's like, oh, you're a completely different person. But it's like more oftentimes than not, you're just a reorganization of somebody kind of deal. Right? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a little more realistic in the way they portray it, where he's not all of a sudden going to be this super like confrontational guy and stuff who's going to go out of his way to be very opinionated and do this, that, and the third and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But he is going to, call out his boss when he's been treated poorly.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a drastic change for anybody, right?
Yeah. Speaking of calling out bosses, so I want to know what y'all's thoughts were about the reveal of the 25th negative and it being Walter. Like, because for me, I thought that was like a really nice cherry on top for the movie because of like the intention and the meaning behind that photo and it being the last cover.
I thought it was great. It made me wish that this was like a real story. You know what I mean? It made me wish, I was like, man, I wish this was like a real thing that Life did.
Yeah.
I don't know if they did.
Cool,
I don't know if do they even still, is that a real thing where they printed their last paper version of their magazine? Like, I don't know. I
had no idea. I had to research. I was like, is Life magazine real? Because I feel like I've heard of Life magazine. I was second guessing myself.
No, Life is definitely real.
Yeah. So is this Life. What? I'm just kidding.
So, yeah, I don't know.
What were your thoughts, Wesley, about like the reveal of that? Did you see the reveal coming? Or was that...
I mean, I think... I thought it was a nice moment. I guess I just didn't think about it all that much. It was a nice moment. I think the movie kind of established like, oh, I mean, what the content of the negative is actually like less important to, what like Walter went through and how he grew as a character. So I think he even came to that realization because at the end he like didn't even buy the magazine. He was like, we could buy it later. Don't want to seem like. I forget the exact quote.
You didn't want to seem uncool and
didn't want to seem
get it right away.
Yeah.
So I get this magazine of myself, please.
So I don't know. I think Walter, like as a character, since the movie's like from his perspective, I think it didn't seem like what was actually on the negative was as important, even though he thought it was going to be the whole time. So I don't know. That's a good use of a MacGuffin in a movie, right? Like this plot item that people are trying to get. It didn't end up like actually mattering that much to. I mean, it was meaningful, but that was like secondary to the purpose of the story. And I think I kind of felt the same way. Like, by the end, I was like, I don't really actually care all that much anymore about like what's on it. I'm just happy for my friend Walter.
That's cool.
So
I like that.
And it was, it just happened to be a sweet little cherry on top that it honored him and Life magazine and all the people that made it what it was. So
nice. Any final thoughts?
It's the quintessence of movies, of film. Jason would say it's the quintessence of film.
No. Yes, I would. Unfortunately.
The quintessence.
Where's my quintessence, Walter?
If you have no idea what we're talking about, that's what they say in the movie, quintessence.
If you have no idea what we're talking about, I'm not going to elaborate.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Well, I guess that's it for The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Yeah. If you guys haven't watched it yet, like if you actually listened to this whole episode and didn't watch it, that's okay. We all have our own choices. But if you haven't watched it yet, we would encourage. It's a really great movie, and I give it a thumbs up for sure.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up out of 10.
Is that what we agreed on? Was it a thumbs up out of 10?
Well, that was just my my words.
I feel like
Y'all can say whatever you want.
Interstellar got a beautiful out of 10 from you. So
Okay. So
what would you use to define? Because you don't do numbers. What would you use to define out of 10, of course?
Okay, so I think one thing that. All right, so I think I guess one thing that really stood out to me about this movie was I thought their capturing of human connection was so beautiful. And I don't mean to bring beautiful back into this. Like, I'm not trying to reuse that word, but
it can't be a beautiful out of 10.
but like just the human connection felt so authentic to me. Like every interaction Walter had, whether it was awkward, a human connection out of 10.
That's what you said right after we saw it.
Did I say that?
Out of 10.
Well, no, you said human connection, and I was like, I'm going to write that down. It's a human connection.
You wrote it down. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we'll roll with it. We'll roll with it. But yeah, I thought that was a really pretty thing about it. Whether it was like an awkward moment, a very sweet moment, a crazy moment, I could definitely connect with just how intentional they were about human connection. And it was cool about no matter who Walter was interacting with, whether it was someone he had a crush on, his boss that he did not like, or someone from across the world who was drunk and about to fly a helicopter. Through a storm. Yeah, through a storm. While also heartbroken. Yeah. Like they were able to capture this idea of like we're all human, and whatever the background, there are things that can connect us and bring us together in a way or cause tension. And I thought that was a really cool thing they were able to capture. But yeah, whatever words you guys have as well is I'm interested. Any final words?
I would say that it's a very relatable movie. It's a very inspiring movie. I think it's a competently directed movie. It looks good. I'd say I'm thinking like 7.5, 8-ish out of 10. I would say the only thing that's holding it back, I would say, is just I wish like I said earlier, the lead performance was a little bit more compelling. But overall, I mean, it's a solid movie that I would say you should definitely check out out of 10.
Out of 10.
I think I feel pretty similarly. I think it's great. I think it's really funny. I think it has enough to give you to like chew on while you're watching it, and then after.
That was my chewing sound.
Yeah, great performances all around, even if most of the work is on Ben Stiller / Walter Mitty's character. Great directing by Ben Stiller, honestly, of the films I've seen him do, which I didn't even know he did like half the stuff he's done. He's a pretty good director.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So yeah, I think I said this when we watched it. I think my number stands 8 out of 10. Very good, great. I think it does have some things holding it back that I mentioned earlier. Some like an unimportant character and some odd scenes here and there. But yeah, I would consider this must-watch territory.
Oh,
okay.
Must watch.
If you like movies, you got to watch this.
So do you have No Man's Land, and then do you have must-watch territory?
I have must-watch. I have watch if, so there's a qualifier.
Okay.
Watch if you're into this kind of thing.
Okay.
And I have a don't watch. Don't even bother. Right? Yeah.
Cool.
So 8 out of 10 must watch.
If you like
Nice.
good movies, don't watch this movie.
Watch Secret Life of Walter Mitty if you like Cinnabon.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Cinnabon.
Only true cineheads.
McDonald's.
Or Papa John's.
eHarmony, any of these things. Papa John's, yes.
Is
Papa
eHarmony
John's.
still a thing? Is that like a real?
It's still a thing.
Really?
Yeah. And actually, quick movie trivia. They built an entire Papa John's specifically for this movie.
What?
Because there was not a Papa John's in Greenland or whatever.
I did think that was odd. I was like, are there really Papa John's in Greenland? Do they like pizza up
I
there?
read that. There's
He
no such
rolls
thing as Papa John's.
But I didn't.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't consider it enough to Google it, so I'm glad you did that.
Anyway.
I'll give you another fun fact.
Okay.
So in the beginning, when Walter is heading to the train station, we hear the score come in behind him. So the score is happening as the beginning of the film is going on. Walter's approaching the train station, and if you hear, there's like a percussion type sound going on that is on beat with the score. And you could think, oh, that's some kind of percussion instrument, going along with the score. But it starts to happen right around the same time as a train rolls in. And it sounds, once you see the visual, you're like, oh, those sound like train tracks. And it's kind of like this chick-chick. And it's along with the beat of the score. And I thought that was like a very cool little plug, little musical
Nice
flex there.
It's even got great sound. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think that will probably do it for the podcast.
Yeah.
Number 3, we made it through 3 podcasts. We're going to be back for 4. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas special.
Let's do it.
So next month we're going to do our Christmas special. Talk about our favorite Christmas movies.
We're actually going to release it in February.
Or a singular movie. So
Don't confuse our listeners, man.
You mean
anyway.
us?
So
So this will be the last episode. Well, we won't have any episode.
This will be the last episode. no more.
even though I just said we're going to come back.
No, so like this episode will come out, and then episode 4 will be in December. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone! If you celebrate Thanksgiving, we hope you have a wonderful November holiday. And
Thanks for saying happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you're
starting
welcome.
Thanksgiving early, but
Thanks for thanking me.
Merry Thanksgiving. I don't use that happy stuff. What am I, British?
British.
Merry Thanksgiving. Happy Christmas.
Oh no.
Anyway,
Jason doesn't
I think
like
if
that.
you're Canadian, you've already had Thanksgiving. So
Canadians
if you're
have
Canadian, just ignore
Thanksgiving
this.
in October,
So,
which is for losers, by the way.
Wait, what'd you say?
Canadians are not losers.
I know having Thanksgiving in October is for losers. That's what I said.
So you're saying that Canadians are losers?
That's not what I said. No.
Wait, where does Thanksgiving happen in October?
In
In Canada.
Really?
Yeah. It's very sad.
If you're a Canadian listening to this, thank you so much for listening. I apologize on behalf of Jason. We need to wrap the show up, guys.
Yes, we do. Okay, so guys and gals, if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can look up On the Slate Podcast. If you want to check us out on YouTube, you can type in On the Slate Podcast. We are there as well. If you want to reach out to us, send us your comments, your questions, any feedback you might have, or you just want to connect, you can email us at ontheslatepod@gmail.com.
Send us our first ever email. I don't think we've gotten an email yet.
Well, I did get an email from Instagram verifying that
we created
that
an
we
account?
made our
Okay.
account.
So be our very first email.
Or don't.
But do, actually. Anyway, that will do it for the On the Slate movie podcast. I'm Wesley.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Asher.
And God bless.